The men of the Czechoslovak legions were fighting without a country, so they had to join other nations to one day get a country. They fought with the Italians, the French, the Serbians, and even the Russians. They were mostly recruited into the French Foreign Legion since they did not have a country. The Czechs and the Slovaks were, however, part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire and fought with them as well. They were not represented fairly in the dual monarchy as the Hungarians were. They were the industrial heartland of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and was the third for Czechs and the fourth for Slovaks, largest ethnic groups and the biggest Slavic ones. And that's a lot, with the empire being mostly Slavic. The Bohemians were the most developed part of the empire, almost on the level of Germany and France. Unlike much of Austria Hungary, morale was very low for the Czechs and the Slovaks when the war broke out. Coupled with the empire status, they also had to fight fellow Slavs and other Czechoslovakians in France, Russia, and even Italy. The men of the legions in those Entente nations were not Czech legions yet, but they were in very autonomous regiments of Czechoslovakians. Serbia, while little in number, they did volunteer and help fill in the line. And with a small nation like Serbia, they needed all the help they can get. In the first few months they only had hundreds, but by the war's end, they had hundreds of thousands of them. France. The second biggest legion were the French Foreign Legion, or the Rajda Nazda. Recruitment began a week earlier as the mobilization started, and when the war started, there were 314 Czechs and 2 Slovaks who joined up and would be then integrated into a Moroccan division in the French Foreign Legion. At Arras they suffered heavy casualties, and when it was disbanded, and who remained went over to other divisions, that was it. However, in their sacrifice they laid the foundation for legions abroad, and recruitment in France rose. Mikhail Stefanik, the Minister of War, and Thomas Masaryk, the future President of Czechoslovakia, began to organize and recruit the Czechoslovakian units in France, Russia, Romania, and even in Italy. They reported all to France, and by 1918 the American Czechs and Slovaks were there as well. French President Pocory assigned him to be in the autonomous Czechoslovakian units in the French army in 1917, and the 21st and the 22nd Rifle Brigade soon followed. They were the first Czechoslovakian brigade, and they fought for the remainder of the war on the Western Front. Italy. In Italy the situation was different, and they did not warm to the idea of a Czechoslovakian legion just yet. Before the war there were only a few hundred Czechs and Slovaks in the Empire of Italy, the least compared to France and Russia. The problem with the Czechoslovakian legions in general was to commit the destruction and the dissolution of Austria Hungary, and the Italians just wanted land from Austria Hungary. But the Italians did take a lot of Austro-Hungarian POWs, which were mostly Czechs and Slovaks. By 1917 the POW counts were by nationality for the multinational empire, and the Italians finally gave the okay for the Italian Czech-Slovak Legion. The Corps of the Czechoslovak Volunteers was created by brother Josip Čapek. These men were mostly used as scouts for the Italian army, as they knew Austro-Hungarian tactics, movements, and spoke Austrian and Hungarian. The Italians did not give an autonomous unit until the Battle of Caporetto with a little help from Stefanik. In April 1918 the Czechoslovak legions in Italy were approved. There were 13,000 soldiers and 340 officers in the corps. A bit after the war in 1919 the Czechoslovak Corps was created to serve and fight off the Polish and the Hungarian claims to land in the new country of Czechoslovakia, and along with the National Guard, who also fought off these claims, was also created around this time from former POWs. But now to head east. Russia. The biggest concentration of Czechs and Slovaks were in the Russian Empire, with more than 100,000 or more of Czechs and Slovaks already living and even having Russian citizenship. At the beginning of the war, the Česká Druzna, or the Česká Friends, were formed to fight Austria-Hungary, which was the base for the future of the legion there. They were never a full unit and often were tasked with small attacks, gathering information, scouting, and convincing Czechs and Slovaks to change sides. The Serbian Corps was also sent to Russia, but they wore Serbian uniforms and were sent under Serbian regulations and guidance. By 1916, since Serbia was in exodus and had no plans to form an autonomous Czechoslovak regiment, they were sent east to fight for the Russians, forming the Czechoslovak Rifle Brigade that May. They always wanted independent units, as they saw it as the key to getting Entente support and recognition for the new Czechoslovakian nation. There was a problem, but there was also a loophole. The defectors of Austro-Hungarians were still Austro-Hungarian citizens and were breaking the 1907 Hague Convention, and they were technically traitors. Tsar Nicholas II, while appreciating their bravery, saw them as traitors to a brother monarch, and he supported the Hague Conventions, hence no autonomous Czechoslovak units. But Stepanek argued that the Germans were using poison gas, the Austrians were hanging civilians, the Ottomans were actually doing the genocide around this time, and they all knew on restricted submarine warfare, and the willingness of the Czechoslovak legions, and their willingness to fight Austria-Hungary, proved their loyalty. Thus, the Entente can legally use Czechoslovakians in their armies. The greatest moment in Czechoslovak military history and the birth of the Czechoslovak nation came in 1917 with the Kerensky Offensive. As the Czechoslovaks took part in the Battle of Zaborov on the 17th of July 1917, there were 3,500 men under Russian Colonel Kornilov. They held 6 miles of line while the Austro-Germans held the same, and the most of the Austro-Hungarian troops were Czechs and Slovaks. As part of the Kerensky Offensive, they attacked the lines as Russian shock troops, and broke the lines and took 4 miles of trenches, 3,300 prisoners, and 20 big guns. That was basically the size of their brigade. Only 167 men killed and 900 wounded. This battle meant little in the doomed Kerensky Offensive, but it sparked a national identity and became fought law in the Czechoslovakia to come. It helped boost morale, recruitment, and desertions. It was expanded within Russia the most, with 2 brigades, 2 artillery divisions, and there were so many volunteers they had reserves, and a shock troop battalion with Masaryk setting up a cool 50,000 soldiers. But in the same month of October was a revolution. The Ukrainians signed a peace treaty with Germany, so did the Russians of the Bolshevik government, and the Red Army was beginning to form and grow, and a civil war was brewing. It was going to be a long way home. They could not go west, and the Bolsheviks won't let them go north, so they had to go all the way east, through the frozen tundra of Siberia, and take the trip around the world, but I want to start an interesting spin-off to tie into World War II. So let's leave it here for now. Will the Czechoslovaks get out of Russia? Will the Bolsheviks catch them? Will Marina Yalovna make an appearance or cameo? Who knows? Yeah. Will the Czechoslovaks even get home? Will the Bolsheviks win the Russian Civil War? Can I really speak Czechoslovak? Find out next time on Storytime, which is actually right now. I'm gonna record that right now. Pretty meta. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. Storytime. Good.